Hello and welcome to the EdjSports NFL Podcast for Week 16. We'll be recapping the Thursday night action, Christmas Day action, and Sunday action from the day after Christmas. I want to welcome you all to the podcast. Hope everyone had a Merry Christmas and is looking forward to a new year. We got 2021 coming to an end here in just a few days. I am your host, Ian O'Connor, Senior Data Analyst here at EdjSports. Joining me, as always, is our VP of Data Science here at EdjSports, Scott Brown. Scott, did you have a good Christmas?
Yes, Ian, I had a lovely Christmas, spent it with loved ones out of town, so we had to do a little bit of traveling. All of that went off without a hitch, and it was really great, really wonderful to spend that time with everyone, and even was able to catch a little bit of football along the way. How was your Christmas, Ian?
It was good. It was good. Pretty busy. Still have one more Christmas to come on Thursday, and then another Christmas to come next weekend, the second weekend of the new year. So still only about halfway through, but it was good. Got to see some family. Didn't normally see it with last year being messed up. My grandpa wanted to have us all out, so we all got to go out and watch the Packers game with him. So that was a lot of fun. So the weather, as we were talking about before we got on here, was weird but good at the same time. You know, not really cold here in Louisville. It was about 65, 70 degrees. Windows down on Christmas Day is odd, but we kind of get used to it here. I think it's once every 4 or 5 years we get a cold Christmas. Last year we got some snow, so we had to make up for it with unseasonably mild temperatures this year. But now, before we get into recapping the weekend's action, just want to remind you that we are available on the EdjSports Podcast Network, available on your podcast platform of choice, as well as our EdjSports YouTube channel. We'll have all of our podcasts, our pregame matchup videos, and our coach rankings on all of those on our EdjSports YouTube channel as well. So please subscribe to our show, give us a 5-star review, help us to grow our audience, and get this data out to as many people as possible. Again, we'll have a coach rankings update coming up on Wednesday. We will have a video coming out with our Champion Gaming brand ambassador, Katie George. We'll be looking at some of the hot seat coaches. We've covered a few already, but with Black Monday coming up in just a couple weeks, and coaches now able to interview for positions teams able to interview coaches starting, I think, tomorrow on Tuesday now within the last couple of weeks of the year instead of having to wait till the end of the season. It's going to be a lot of talk around coaches on the hot seat. So we will be updating and our coach rankings and taking a look at some of those coaches and see if they're worthy of being on the hot seat, at least from a fourth down decision-making perspective. Some coaches that have been fired or that will be fired are really good in those areas and maybe not even as bad when it comes to their on-field performance, but maybe it's been a little while their tenure. So we will be taking a look at all of that. So without further ado, we'll transition into the Week 16 recap. Normally, this would be the second to last week of the year, but with Week 18 now coming up this season, we've got 2 weeks left. It's still a lot of playoff spots up for grabs, including that AFC East division title. Patriots and Bills been both playing pretty strong lately, or the Patriots pretty strong lately. The Bills have slipped a little bit. They fell to the Patriots just a few weeks ago in that crazy weather game up in New England, or up in Buffalo. On Monday Night Football, where Mac Jones threw the ball only 3 times, I think. So this one was a little bit different. Josh Allen came up big in this one, leading the Bills to victory and now own the tiebreaker for the division with just 2 games to go. This one was really interesting from a fourth down decision-making perspective, Scott, especially when you're looking at the 2 coaches in this. Sean McDermott for the Bills came into this game 5th overall, but only 14th in CCI, that fourth down decision-making metric. So not great, not terrible, kind of middle of the pack. Bill Belichick, on the other hand, only 15th overall. And the Patriots are number 2 in EPI, looking at their on-field performance so far this year, but is only 29th in CCI. And, has really, he turned back the clock on Sunday. He kind of put on a fourth down clinic, if you will, with just a bunch of fourth downs. He went for it 4 times before they got into really, desperation mode late. They were down, I think, 12 or 13 late in the game, just had to go for it. But before that, had 4 of them. Had 2 drives each where they went for it twice, scored 2 touchdowns, added 14.6% in pre-snap win probability on those 4 attempts. They all converted. And then McDermott did the same thing. He had 4 fourth down attempts as well. 3 of those were successful, and all 3 of those successful fourth downs led to touchdowns for the Bills. So he added 9.4% pre-snap win probability for them. So, Scott, just a really big day for both of those coaches. McDermott, not really as surprising to see that aggressive fourth down calling, but Belichick was the huge surprise pretty much from the get-go. He just had it in his mind he was going to go for it, pedal to the metal, just ready to go.
Yeah, I find it interesting too in light of the week prior where, there was some controversy around some late game decision making by Bill Belichick. I think in the media, on social media, to see him come out in this one and just, as you say, just pedal to the metal from the very beginning, four fourth downs, going for it, just about every time the opportunity arose and paid off in a big way. They converted on a lot of those. I think all of those, right? Converted on all of those fourth
The Patriots
downs.
did, yes.
Yeah, turned what would have been, stalled drives into touchdowns in some cases, and just really, yeah, it's a cliche at this point, but really giving his team the best chance to win, even though they were bested in this one. The Bills played very strongly, executed when they needed to, and sort of fought fire with fire by being aggressive on fourth down themselves. And yeah, this one was, I think, a great matchup between two good teams fighting hard for dominance in the AFC East and for playoff spots. The Patriots came in a slight favorite in this one, but only a 1 point favorite. So, two very evenly matched opponents. But yeah, like I said, the Bills came out ahead in this one. They proved themselves to be the better team with a 12-point victory.
Yeah, and one of those decisions, actually the first decision for Belichick, was a 4th and 1 at his own 48 late in the third quarter. They were down 7-0, but this is a situation we've seen all year where those, even when he gets into plus territory at, the opponent's 45, 46, and he's got a 4th and 1 or two, he's been punting. And this year in his own territory, just shy of midfield, not too far back, but chose to go for it and just kind of, I don't know if it was had to do from last week. He had that, you mentioned it was a 4th and goal from the 7, I think, against Indianapolis. They were down 13 at the time. And he came out on Monday. His answer wasn't like completely anti going for it. He said, we just thought there was enough time. It was 9-something minutes left. They did end up kind of getting close, having a chance. We still disagreed with the call, but he didn't come out and say, no, that's where it wasn't a thought in my mind. It was 4th and 7. He kind of made it to where he understand. I think he may even said, I understand where the argument for going for it is coming from. But then this week, like you said, to turn around, and I don't know if it was just a product of playing the Bills and knowing he was going to have to score some points. Although even though that Bills offense has struggled at times this year, been very inconsistent, just knowing that it was going to take more than punts and field goals to win the game against them. So really good to see. Well, hopefully he'll keep it going. It's always hard to tell with him what he's going to do, but this was a good start moving forward, especially as they get into the playoff push, fighting for the division and a playoff spot. It's really no guarantee for anyone other than the Chiefs in the AFC right now. They're the only ones that have clinched a spot, so pretty wide open. The Bills at the 4 seed right now and Patriots at the 6. So that was a really big game there. Another big game was on Christmas Day, the Browns and the Packers. One of the two games. This was the first. Aaron Rodgers banged up, got that toe stepped on a little bit. It looked like on a play, was in some pain, but they were able to fend off Baker Mayfield and the Browns late. Now, Matt LaFleur was our EdjSports Coach of the Year last year. Been near the top of our coach rankings again this year. He's second overall, third in CCI. Had a really, really good decision. Also, a really bad decision late. So the good call came early. It was their first drive after the Browns had put up a touchdown. They missed the extra point. But Green Bay faced 4th and 1 at their own 34 with 11 minutes left. Now, this is a situation, it's early on. You see a lot of coaches punt here. But with that powerful offense Green Bay has, chose to go for it, was a 4.8% increase. Now, Scott, that early in the game, that is a big increase. I don't know if it really gets much bigger than that within the first 5 minutes of a game.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right. It definitely is, and it was an important decision too. They wound up cashing in on this drive, scoring a touchdown, and yeah. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Good point. That to see an error, or excuse me, not an error, but to see something, a fourth down decision be worth this much this early in the game is quite interesting. Close to 5%. Luckily for the Packers, they were able to realize that by keeping the offense on the field. So, 4th and 1 from the Green Bay 34, that would have made it around a 52-yard field goal.
No, they were in their own territory at that point. So
Oh,
that makes
sorry.
it that's even better. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So good catch there. Yeah. So they're on their own 34. So, definitely a decision where we'd see a lot of coaches punt it away there early in the game. There's a lot of game left to play, sort of hide behind that and not really, be of the mind that, hey, like, this is a decision that I can cash in on, that I can really take advantage of. Who knows how many more of these I'll get the rest of the way. Uh, take it while I can, and just sort of maximize my points, from the get go. So, props to Matt LaFleur here. They were trailing 6 points at the time, but you know, it's early. I think oftentimes see a lot of coaches, like I said, punt it away here, but not Matt LaFleur. I think he's pretty ahead of the curve as far as these things go, and this is just another example of that right here. And yeah, the Packers were able to take advantage.
An interesting note on that one too. I wonder if this was kind of a psychological thing too. So the play that got them to 4th and 1 was an 8-yard gain on 3rd and 9. So one of those, a lot of times we see it's a 3rd and 1 and they don't get it, and coach is like, oh man, we just we didn't get it on 3rd and 1. They picked up the 8 and just really no hesitation to go for it, which was awesome. Ironically, this drive ended with a punt on 4th and 6 at the Green Bay 42. Now, those of you listening probably don't know the irony of that, but we'll get to that right away, because late in the game, Packers are facing 4th and 6 on their own 42 again. This time, 2:14 left in the game and leading by only 2 points, 24-22. Now, the Packers at this point, the defense had, handled the day really. Picked off Baker Mayfield 3 times. One of them, I believe, was a pick six. So it might have been last week. I'm sorry. But all the interceptions led to Packers touchdowns. But then that 4th and 6 late, I mentioned, they chose to punt with 2 minutes left, up 24-22. This was our biggest error of the week, a 12.4% error. And, I get this. We get this, Scott. Maybe you want to kind of talk through this one a little bit for those listening that maybe think, are you crazy? 4th and 6, if you don't get it, they're already almost in field goal range to win the game.
Yeah, totally understand where I think most listeners would be coming from by saying, wow, 4th and 6, in such a close game. What are you doing? How can you recommend going for it here? And I still think that this is the right move. Not only do I think it's the right move, I think it's a big error to give the ball away with just over 2 minutes left here, where a field goal can beat you. We've talked about this time and time again. NFL offenses are of a caliber now where, you're just going to lose so many times giving the ball away when they have this much time, exactly with this much time to work. The Browns are a very competent NFL offense. Baker Mayfield may not be Aaron Rodgers, but he's certainly, I think at least mid-tier or maybe even slightly above average across the league at starting quarterback. Yeah, you're just, when you give the ball away here in this spot, you're just going to lose so often. And it didn't happen in this one. Obviously, the Packers were able to intercept Mayfield when it mattered most, but you can't count on that to win. You can't count on that to win. The Browns were ultimately able to get the ball right to midfield with 50 seconds left and some timeouts with still to work. It does not take very much to get into field goal range, and then sink even a sort of a mid-range field goal as time is basically expiring. And that's going to be it for you. So yeah, we really don't like this one. It is 4th and 6. A big part that a big aspect of this decision that really clinches it is that you have that Packers offense. You have Aaron Rodgers leading the way here. He's just as good as it gets. He's really in a league of his own when it comes to these big moments. And yeah, our model wants to keep him on the field and go for it here. So there's just, like I said, too many ways that this one plays out where it doesn't work in your favor. Keep the best quarterback perhaps ever, but certainly, one of the best quarterbacks ever on the field, and go for it here. So yeah, we didn't like this one. We think it was about a 12.4% error. And even though we think highly of Matt LaFleur in general, we think that, he missed the boat on this one. And, it didn't wind up burning him this time, but certainly should a big moment come up like this in the future, we would hope that maybe he would be able to find the right call here and keep the offense on the field.
Yeah, and especially when you've got a guy like Devontae Adams. Sometimes it seems like him and Aaron Rodgers are pretty much a cheat code, the way they're in sync, and the releases Adams has for him to get open. Even Aaron Jones out of the backfield, catching passes can do a lot. Alan Lazard, has come up big. So not only is Aaron Rodgers, he's got these weapons that he's kind of gotten in sync with. Lazard, even the last couple of years, they've gotten that chemistry between them as well. But That 4th and 6, I think, trips people up a lot. It's those 4th and mediums that they expect to basically. It seems like fans think it's a 5% conversion rate, where it's not great. It's probably in the 30s. I think when we've looked at it before, definitely below 50%, I would think. But for an offense like Aaron Rodgers with like the Packers, maybe not. They're probably above average easily. I think the number one offense. So expected probably to convert that much more than an average team. And we talk about it all the time too. We've had a couple of these where Green Bay's got a couple timeouts left, still have the 2 point or the 2 minute warning. Even if you give up a field goal and there's 35, 40 seconds left on the clock, whatever, you've got your timeouts, can run it down. If the Browns get a first down and then you're able to hold them, you've got Aaron Rodgers and you're only down one. All you need is a field goal. So again, just if they're gonna score a field goal, you want it to be sooner rather than later in this situation, because if they make a field goal with 5 seconds left or no time on the clock, you've got no shot. So completely agree that you've got to take your chances there with that offense and just not even give them a chance. You mentioned that the Packers defense saved the day, kind of had an interception up at the midfield, 50 seconds left. Probably should have been a pass interference on the Packers defense on that play that would have given the Browns a first down about 10 yards down the field, I think. Been very close to field goal range, but nevertheless, there was no penalty, and that was our third most impactful play of the week, a 46.9% decrease in win probability for the Browns. So Packers defense coming up big. Kind of seems like sometimes they're a bend but don't break defense, but how many times do we see, Mayfield had a bad day, but you mentioned drove them down the field a little bit, got to midfield, had 3 interceptions, but Matt Stafford had a 3 interception day yesterday, came up with big plays late to get a field goal to put them up 10, basically seal the game. Like, how often do you see that? A quarterback still having a bad game, but all it takes is one drive. And a guy, Baker Mayfield might not be the best quarterback in the league. He's still a very capable quarterback with some that's able, as we saw, to move the ball down the field. So definitely think they should have gone for it. And then that interception, though, by the Packers defense, again, the third most impactful play of the week. So now that we've covered kind of some of those biggest storylines, those big games from the weekend, we're going to move into our top 5, starting with our top 5 most impactful plays. So Scott, we'll talk there. And these, for those of you that are new listening, these are the plays that had the biggest impact on the game in terms of win probability. So the biggest win probability swings from the offense's perspective. So number 5 was the Bears and Seahawks. This was an exciting game. This was a game winner. Down 1, a minute 1 second left. The Bears decided to go for it. Nick Foles after the game said, I was hoping we were going to go for 2. At this point in the season, the Bears really have nothing to lose. They're out of the playoffs. Fighting for draft position, but those guys are pros. They want to win the game. And going for it, the 2-point conversion they converted with the amazing catch by Damiere Byrd. Go up and get it. Seahawks tried to push him out of bounds. Couldn't get him out. He was able to get a foot and a knee down, hold on to the ball with one hand. There ended up being the game winner. There was a 25% increase in win probability. Scott, I'm sure you were jumping for joy at that one as a Bears fan, right?
Yeah, right. It was an amazing catch, certainly, but the season at this point, as you mentioned, is sort of in the dustbin for the Chicago Bears. Playing for playing for draft position is certainly one way to put it. But yeah, I think you bring up a good point. These guys are professionals. They want to win. They're playing for spots in this league. This matters to them, and it was cool to see. The Bears play for victory there. They're certainly not playing for a playoff spot at this point. This was kind of a cool one. So the Bears were around 25% equity in this game, going into this play. And the funny thing to kind of note about this one is, regardless of whether or not they converted or they failed, it probably would have wound up on our list, right? Because at 25%, you go for it and fail, you're going to drop pretty much all the way down to 0. You go for it and make it, and then as we see here, that gained about 25%. So it's just kind of amusing to me to note that, even in spite of taking the lead here, they still had to fade the Seahawks' potential for a comeback with a full minute with which to work in 2 timeouts, which they were able to do, and get in the win column for in a season where the wins have been few and far between for the Chicago Bears.
Yeah, that was a fun one too. All the snow, and it kind of dissipated as the game went on. But the beginning of the game, man, it was snowing pretty hard, a ton of snow. So that's always fun to see, especially on Christmas weekend, seeing that. But that was big, that play for me. In fantasy playoffs, a lot of people probably had games on the line there, but playing against both David Montgomery and Cole Kmet was huge that game did not go to overtime for me, because I could not give up any more points to those guys that I was playing against. But yeah, huge game, a lot of fun, a big win there for the Bears, and a 25% increase in win probability. Moving on to number 4, another game. This one was a really good game, a close game between two really bad teams, but it was Jaguars-Jets. Jaguars were down 5, had 2nd and 10 at the Jets 31, only 41 seconds left, no timeouts. So going down, they need a touchdown to win, 31 yards away. And Trevor Lawrence, drops back to pass, has an opening on the left side, and gets all the way down to the 5-yard line, giving them 1st and goal at the 5 with, I think, 32 seconds left, with setting them up for a potential game-winning touchdown. It didn't work out, but still the play here increased their win probability by 33.2%, actually made them favorites up to 68% at that point, having enough time for not basically having enough time for 4 shots at the end zone from the 5 was a big one. Ended up not working out, which we'll get to in a moment. But that play to set them up was a 33.2% increase at number 4. Number 3 we covered was the Browns. The interception that Baker Mayfield threw at the end of the game, Green Bay winning it there, took the Browns from 48.6 down to 1.7%. They still had 3 timeouts. There was still a chance they could get the ball back and win. Very slight, though. That was a 46.9% decrease. And then back to that Jaguars game, they had 4th and goal at the 1, 12 seconds left. So last shot, barring a defensive penalty. Trevor Lawrence pass falls, incomplete, penalty. There was some hope for the Jaguars there. Ended up being on them, an illegal shift, ending the game, dropping them down by 52.5%. Now, that was just got a bad game, or bad teams, but a really good game. There were some good 4th down decisions in this one. We'll get to a bad one and a good one from the Jets. Ron Middleton filling in for Robert Saleh. But all in all, like an exciting game to watch. Sometimes those games between the worst teams can turn out to be fun ones.
Yeah, definitely. I think, what better way to end a game, what more exciting way to end a game than the very way that this one ended, having a 4th and goal from the 1 with basically, last play of the game, there's 12 seconds left. You need a touchdown to win. Field goal does you no good. What's going to happen? It's basically a coin flip. And, just makes it all of those things make it a very exciting play to spectate, to watch. And, it didn't wind up working out for the Jags here, but certainly from an overall fan's perspective, definitely a very intriguing game to watch, considering the way it ended.
And another one at our number 1, it's pretty much, or not pretty much the same, but a very similar situation. We had 2 bad teams, Lions, Falcons, came down. The Lions were down only 4 points with Tim Boyle filling in again for Jared Goff. Had 1st and goal at the 9 with 39 seconds left. So down 4. Mentioned the Jaguars were down 5 and had 1st and goal at the 5 with about 32 seconds left. So very similar situation. Lions get 4 cracks at the end zone from the 9-yard line, unless they can get even closer and get out of bounds. And give them a shot there. But first play, 1st and goal, intercepted at the 1-yard line by Atlanta. Game over, dropping them from 58.1% down to 0%. So just a heartbreaking way to lose again for the Lions. Really not much on the line for them. Them and the Jaguars were still fighting for the number 1 pick. If the Jaguars had won with that Detroit loss, Detroit would have moved to the number 1 spot in the draft. But the Jaguars hang on to it with losses, with their loss. So tough way to lose, but in the end, it could end up being a good thing for both of those teams if either one of them gets the first pick, or even if that kind of clinches a second pick. Although the Texans got another win, so that didn't do much for them looking to the future.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, and sort of taking a step back from just thinking about this in pure football terms. If you were betting this one, specifically if you were betting the total in this one, pregame total for the Lions Falcons was around 42.5. You'll notice that the score at this point was 16-20 or 36. So if you were holding either a bet on the over or under in this one, you were definitely sweating down the stretch here, because Lions if they're able to punch it in, you need them to be able to punch it in and obviously still kick that extra point to to cash her over. So if you're out there listening and watching this one with that bet on, yeah, definitely a fun sweat to have. As you mentioned, two sort of mainly, mostly irrelevant teams, certainly in Detroit's case. But yeah, it's still some action to squeezed out of this one. If you were, depending on what sort of bet you had down on it, definitely a fun way to end it.
Yeah, that would have been a tough one too if they score that. It would have been hard to run, 4 10-second plays from that close. But if that got down to a last second touchdown by the Lions, it would have put them up by 2. And by rule, they would have to kick the extra point because the Falcons could run it back. But it would be interesting if it would have been a bad way to lose if the Lions did what Washington did and just took a knee on the 2-point conversion with no time left if it came down to it to keep that at 42 points. That would have been the smart football play, and there would have been a lot of upset people there, like you said, that bet the over in that one. That would have been one of the worst beats that you could have there. But that does it for the most impactful plays. We're going to move into our top 5 best fourth down decisions. Before we do, just don't forget to rate, review, subscribe to all of the Edge Sports shows. Again, those are on your preferred podcast platform or our Edge Sports YouTube channel, or both. Why not subscribe to both? So now moving on to the best fourth down decisions of the weekend. With one game to go, but at number 5, we've got the Packers and Browns. We covered this one already. Matt LaFleur, that 4th and 1 early in the game on his own 34 was a 4.8% chance or increase in pre-snap win probability for the Packers. Just a great call with that offense to go for it there. Interestingly, all of the top fourth down goes this week were successful. And all looks like 3 of the 5 won their game. So all successful, a few more wins than losses. So it was a pretty good week. Then moving on to number 4, we've got Jaguars Jets again. So it was a 4th and 1 at the Jets 39. Late in the first quarter, only 22 seconds left. Jaguars are down 3 at this point. Instead of attempting a long field goal, about a 57-yarder, chooses to go for it, ends up getting 20 yards. The decision to go for it was a 5.8% increase in pre-snap win probability. Really not much to talk about on that one. A 4th and 1 in that kind of mid-range, no man's land, especially without a kicker like a Matt Prater or Justin Tucker. 57 is a long one. So pretty straightforward there. The Broncos, this one is interesting to me, though. When I was watching, I wasn't sure they were going to do it. Number 3, fourth quarter, 5.5 minutes left. Broncos still have 2 timeouts. They're down 4, 4th and 1 from their own 34. Instead of, I think a lot of coaches, even I would have expected Vic Fangio to punt here, to be honest, saying, there's 5.5 minutes left. Their defense is pretty good. They've only given up 14 points at this point. Still have 2 timeouts plus the 2-minute warning. But he chooses to go for it and gets it, which makes it even better. But just a great call, 6% increase in pre-snap win probability. And we had quite a few big ones this week. And this was a good one that, again, I don't know what else to say, Scott, then I was surprised to see Fangio go for it there.
Totally agree. I mean, we're not done with Fangio on our top 5s today. We'll get to some more calls from him here in just a second. Unfortunately, not so great ones, but yeah, give him credit where credit is due right here. I also was a bit, would be a bit surprised, or am a bit surprised that he went for it. I think if you sort of, gave this situation to me with blindfolds on, and asked me, what do you think he does? I would pick punt. I think he's still sort of in that old school cohort in my mind for NFL head coaches. And, with 5.5 minutes left in the fourth quarter, there's just too much time left. Trust your defense, punt the ball away. It's a close one, keep it close, that sort of thing. But it's really not the right move when you're trying to win games. And I think maybe it's, that idea, as we've talked about many times, is starting to take hold across the league and all sorts of, for all sorts of coaches and teams that maybe in the past, where you wouldn't expect it. It definitely seems to be playing out before our eyes. So I think this is a good example of that, and props to Vic Fangio. As far as the decision goes, it's a slam dunk. It's always going to be a layup when you have 4th and 1 here in a close game at the end. Possessions are going to be few and far in between, and you really have to make the most of the few you have left. 4th and 1, this may be your best shot. So yeah, keep the offense out there, even though you're on your own 34. It's going to be the right move. You're down 4, so you can't take for granted that the next time you get the ball back that you aren't down even more. In many cases, down more than one possession, and yeah, that's just going to be near impossible to come back from. So yeah, keep the offense out there and keep it moving.
Yeah, you mentioned Fangio seems like he's kind of an old school guy. I agree. So we're both surprised, but to see him go for it. Last year, he was 27th overall in our coach rankings, 18th in CCI, not so bad. This year, I actually forgot to see he's actually number 9 in our coach rankings through
Wow.
week 15, 13th in CCI, 13th in EPI. So equal there. Middle of the pack in fourth down decision making. As you mentioned, we'll get to some bad decisions by him. So it's not all good all the time, but it's also not all bad all the time. As we just talked about, this decision was a really good one on his part, and it was late in the game, kind of when it mattered most. His other two, I think, came a little bit earlier in the game. So late when they needed it, he made the right decision. So kudos to him, but we'll have to get on his case a little bit more here in a minute. Going up now to number 2 was Jets now against the Jaguars, up 16-15, 4th and goal at the 1. Fill-in coach or interim coach Ron Middleton, filling in for Robert Saleh, who was on the COVID reserve list, chose to go for it. This one is pretty much a no-brainer. Really not much to talk about. Those 4th and goals at the 1, very rarely see coaches kick at this point, unless it's the end of the half. Even then, some of them will go for it. So this one was a 7% increase, number 2 for the week. And then number 1, Rich Bisaccia, who has been not very good in our coach rankings this year, coming in all the way down. The combination of him and John Gruden, 29th overall, 28th in CCI. Interestingly, John Gruden was like 5 or 6th in CCI. He was top 10 before stepping aside after week 5. And Bisaccia has only tanked the Raiders' rankings since then. But this was a good one here. 4th and 1 at the Denver 46 in the 4th quarter. I would say pretty much a no-brainer. To us, it is, and a lot of coaches. But we've seen situations from him where he punts this ball a lot of times. So really good decision by him. 8.7% increase. Good for number 1 overall. Again, I don't know if you want to add anything more there, Scott. Just kind of plus territory right across midfield, 4th and 1 early in the 4th is pretty straightforward, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think one minor detail here is that it appears to have been 4th and short. So that just further, solidifies this decision as a clear go, and would have made, I think, punting or any alternative decision an even worse alternative. So give Rich Bisaccia credit here, but that the fact that it was a short 1 yard to gain probably also sort of makes this less an impressive decision, but nonetheless, we'll give him the credit. We'll give him the credit, and gave the Raiders 8.7% additional GWC than had they punted it. So good on him for finding the right call.
Yep, and that is number 1 of our best 4th down decisions of week 16. So now that the good decisions are out of the way, we got to move on to the bad. We're going to look at the top 5 worst 4th down decisions from this weekend's action. These are decisions that coaches made that had the biggest negative impact, or that had the biggest decrease on the team's pre-snap win probability by kicking, punting, going for it or punting or kicking a field goal versus going for it. Sometimes we do have teams that go for it when they should have kicked. We had one last week, but this week, again, most of the time they're all kicks when they should go. So number 5 was 49ers against the Titans back on Thursday night. 49ers trailing by 7, 4th and 9 at the Tennessee 43 with only 9.5 minutes left, choosing to punt. This one is worth 3.7%. It's a 4th and 9, that's pretty long, but at the same time, you're coming down late in the game, you're down 7. That's a decision where you've got to go for that, I think. And being at the 43, there's not as much to gain from that field position, flipping field position there, Scott.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, the 4th and 9 definitely jumps out, but 49ers are actually sneaky good, sneaky good team, and certainly have an offense and an offensive mindset where I think, they have a lot of, plays in the playbook where they could pick this one up. So, I think, to be honest, we're definitely, this is definitely more of a marginal disagreement at 3.7% GWC. Fact of the matter is there's just, as we've talked about time and time again, these coaches are getting better. And so we're sort of having to go deeper and deeper to find, play calls that we disagree with, so much so that on any given week, the bottom of our list may not be egregiously bad play calls. I think this is maybe one of them where, we think it's an error, but can sort of, I guess, at least wrap my mind around how we would see coaches punt here. But yeah, I think that being said, to make the case for this one, yeah, we think it's the right move because you're at the Tennessee 43. So like, a field goal is kind of unrealistic at 61 yards. Uh, Punting the ball really doesn't do much for you in general. This was pretty much a best case scenario punt, and puts pins Tennessee at their 3. So I guess if you knew that you were going to be able to do that every time, maybe.
Yeah.
But you're down 7. So punting, you're not going to punch your way to victory, and being that you're about midway through the 4th, it's about time to really ramp up the aggressiveness. And yeah, we would have liked to seen a go on this, in this situation from the 49ers.
Yeah, and if you're going to give up a score, which obviously they think that they're going to be able to hold the Titans here, but if you do for a field goal, it's going to take them starting at their own 3. If you do pin them, that's great, but if they go down and score, if they get a field goal, it's going to take up probably half that time on the clock, if not more. If they get a touchdown, it might take up the whole clock, or if not, leaving 2 or 3 minutes left, and then you're down 14 if you give up a touchdown. 10 with a field goal. But as you said, coaches, are getting better, so we don't have a lot. This is kind of a smaller error that could be argued either way, I think. And this is one of those weeks. I think this was actually our highest rate of correct decisions of the season. It was around 35% that we had of coaches going for it. So it's a really good week for coaches, and this is one of those coming in. Over 3% is still a big error, but still below 4% compared to the good decisions that were made, and some of these other errors isn't really a horrible one, like you said. So I completely agree with you there. Number 4, again, Vic Fangio. He's got number 3 and number 4 here. So number 4, they were down 1 with 19 seconds left in the third quarter. 4th and 3 at the Vegas 37. Chooses to kick a field goal. It's a 4.2% decrease in pre-snap win probability. Ends up missing the field goal, so makes it a little bit worse. But again, just kind of that no man's land. McManus is a pretty good leg. 55 yards isn't, terribly, difficult, I guess, compared to some other kickers that would be attempted from there. But still, 4th and 3 in kind of that mid-range area is one where we think they should have gone for it. And then number 3 is a little bit maybe counterintuitive, or one that we're definitely going to get some questions on, I think. But, it's pretty straightforward. Broncos were down 4. This was late in the second quarter, 2:53 left. 4th and 1 at their own 17. Choosing to punt was a 4.9% error. Scott, you want to talk through that one a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So, the big thing is 4th and 1. In the modern NFL, you're hardly going to see us defending punting on 4th and 1. And I think this is just really case in point. So, I know the sort of rebuttal here is that, oh, well, you're on your own 17-yard line. So you're, when you go for it and you fail, you're giving the ball over to your opponent in such, great territory. They're likely going to realize points. Yeah, I guess, but you have to also consider the positives here. So with about just under 3 minutes left, you're going to be going and converting this far and away a large chunk of the time. You're already trailing by 4, so you're already in a situation where you really need to start thinking about making up a deficit. And then there's just when this works out, it works out in such a fashion that a lot of times you're going to lock your opponent out of possessing the ball any additional times before the end of the half. So you get that 2-for-1 effect, kind of, that we've talked about before. Like the idea that originated in basketball also applies here to football. It makes possessions and sort of coming out and winning the not just the length of possession, but the number of possession, winning that battle is so advantageous. And so as you draw down to the end of either half, but predominantly the end of the first half, and your decisions are sort of amplified, right? Your decisions, because they impact, right, that possession battle, they have such large impact. And I think that's what we saw here. And then, 4th and 1, like, certainly if you're not going for it on 4th and 1, there's no other distance that would have tempted you to going for it. So it's, it winds up being about a 5% error. We think it's a bad one. I know that probably, old school Vic Fangio, that label that we applied to him, despite his maybe sneaky good CCI ranking, sort of sort of came to fruition here, and yeah, he winds up punting right before the half, and just a situation that we think is definitely one where you want to keep the offense out there and go for it.
Yeah, this one actually turned out interesting because I didn't realize how this half played out. But you mentioned, locking your opponent out of the 2-for-1. The Raiders did get the ball after halftime. If you don't get it here, there's 2:53 left. They've still got 3 timeouts. The Raiders are probably going to score pretty quickly. If you can hold them to a field goal, at least you still get another possession. The way it ended up playing out, though, the Raiders fumbled 2 plays later. The Broncos gained only 4 yards but got a field goal out of it. Then, after the kickoff, Las Vegas threw an interception that Denver returned to the 1 yard line and got a touchdown. So they punted with 2:53 left, but still ended up getting 10 points before halftime and took a lead, a 13-7 lead into halftime. So doesn't often happen that way, but it ended up kind of being a positive outcome for the Broncos in that situation. But moving on to number 2 is an interesting one. This is one that I kind of explained through and ran some extra numbers. So I'll kind of put some numbers of this one, and then Scott let you kind of talk through it. But Jets up 2 on the Jaguars. So 23-21, only 1:49 left in the game, 4th and goal at the 2. The Jets can go for it, and with a touchdown and extra point would pretty much put the game away, a 9-point lead with, 1:40 left, 45 seconds left. Or they can kick a field goal, which they chose to do, take a 5-point lead. So this is one of those we say, we hate when teams go from a 3-point lead to a 6-point lead. This one's a little bit different because they go from a 2-point lead where a field goal beats you to a 5-point lead to where a touchdown beats you. Still, a touchdown beats you either way, whether you go for it and don't convert or you kick the field goal, but you have a chance to put the game away with a touchdown. Ends up being a 7.1% error. And just quick numbers I ran, the required conversion rate on this, Scott, was only 25%. And even, an average team like the Jets against, Jaguars don't have a good defense. I would, put them probably around 50-50 shot, maybe a little under 50%, but still that 25% is about half of what the expected conversion rate is on a 4th and goal from the 2. Would you agree there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, once again, I know that this is maybe a little bit atypical, and maybe we'll get there one day where we see that this also becomes sort of, part of the, a strategy that's part of the current NFL meta where, as coaches become, as becoming aggressive on 4th down becomes more widespread, we'll start to see coaches even consider, decisions like this, where, as you laid it out, I think it's defensible, right? It's sort of, it allows you to evade criticism when you go for it and fail. And so, yeah, let's stay safe, kick the field goal. Like, we can defend that. We go from being up 2 where field goal can beat us to up 5. And so we're insulated from a field goal. Now they can still score a touchdown. You're giving, but, for a lot of reasons, I think that this, this is really, when you think about it, really not the right move. Because when you go for it here and win, which is going to be, we think, a good chunk of the time here. You said, under 50%, but certainly, a healthy chunk of the time, probably in the low to mid 40s. The game is just over. The game is just over. Likewise, when you fail, the game is not over, and there's so many ways in which you can win. You're facing off against the Jags offense that's, let's be honest, just not that good. And they do only have to go get into field goal range to beat you, but yeah, they're going to be pinned deep in their own territory, starting at their own 2, and they're going to be constrained by the clock to some degree, right? They have 1 timeout, and they'll be around minute 40 left in the game. So there's just a lot of ways you can still win, even when you go for it and fail. Even when it seems really bleak and really bad, there's still a good amount of equity that you have in the game. So when you add those 2 things together, we think it winds up being about a 7% better decision to go here. And yeah, I mean, I can't say I'm terribly surprised that wasn't the actual play call, but we do think it's the right one when you sit down and really give it a think. And but obviously Ron Middleton here is filling in for Salah. Probably doesn't want to rock the boat or attract too much negative attention. So certainly not terribly shocked to see the field goal. Yeah, it is an interesting one to think about, and it winds up being maybe to some non-obvious, but it takes the number 2 spot here on our top 5 worst calls this week. And yeah, it's just a very interesting one to think about, what you would do if you were in the situation. We think going forward it's right, and we're going to stand by that.
Absolutely agree. And then number one, we covered the Packers' late game decision. Only 2 minutes left, 4th and 6 at their own 42. Leading by 2 was a 12.4% error. We kind of talked through the reasoning behind that at the top of the show. So not really much to add there. So that'll do it for our top fives. We're going to move into our Monday Night Football preview, which will probably be pretty quick. I think, Scott, like we talked about, we've got what the model says, but this one's interesting because we've got Ian Book making his NFL debut. Came into the season, like you said, the 4th string quarterback here. Really didn't show a lot at Notre Dame as far as throwing the ball. The Dolphins, meanwhile, are looking to continue their strong play. They've won 6 straight since losing 7 in a row early in the season. They're sitting, with a win. They've got the tiebreaker over Baltimore, who's currently in the 7 seed. But Baltimore is ahead of the Raiders on tiebreaker, but the Raiders have the head-to-head over Miami. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out if they win, but they can move right up into that 7 or 8 seed potentially. And then important for the Saints too, they're at 7-7, sitting at the 8th seed. If they're able to get a win, it'll tie them with the Eagles. So it'll be interesting there. I think those two played. I forget who got the win in that one though. The Eagles got the win. So the Eagles would have the tiebreaker. The Saints would still be in the 8th spot, but still a huge, huge one here for both teams. So Scott, what are the numbers looking like? We got both coaches actually are coaching this one. It's good. Brian Flores 22nd in our EdjSports coach rankings. Sean Payton 18th. Really hasn't been that good this year as far as 4th down decision making. They're down at 25, whereas Brian Flores 16th, middle of the pack. So really, it'll be interesting to see how this one goes. What do the numbers say, and what's the market looking like on this one?
Yeah, so we'll just start off here first with a comparison between our model and the current market lines. Unfortunately, don't have anything too interesting for our listeners. Edge fair value sits at Dolphins -3, which actually matches very closely the current market line. So it looks like, depending on what books you're looking at, but most of them have the Dolphins as 3-point favorites in this one. So really, nothing that's too enticing there. As we kind of shift over in here and look at the total, we start to see some disagreement, but I'm going to go into detail here in just a moment. So the current market line sits at 37, which is a very, very low total, especially in 2021. The edge fair value here is 43. So that is a fairly big discrepancy, on the face of it. But I think you mentioned that, you did a little searching here. It looks like, this edge fair value on the total is the second lowest of the week. It's I think just admittedly very difficult for our model to even have a concept of just how low scoring the market thinks this game can be, and that's largely a function of the COVID situation surrounding it. So Taysom Hill, starting quarterback for the New Orleans Saints, he is out on the COVID reserve list. Trevor Siemian, the number 2 quarterback for New Orleans, also on the COVID reserve list. So quite a far drop from starting quarterback to basically a mid-round rookie, Ian Book, who we have no data on, has played no, as far as I understand, no snaps and no meaningful playing time in the NFL. Yeah, and he would have been number 4 on the depth chart at the start of the season when they still had Jameis. So there's just a whole lot of uncertainty around this one, admittedly, and for that reason, I would really advise listeners to obviously notice the discrepancy of our model, but take it with a grain of salt. I think it just being honest with everyone, there's just a whole lot of uncertainty baked into it. This game is exceptional in that the backup quarterback situation is so much different, I think, than a typical backup quarterback situation that our model is really built on over the sort of historical data that we have. Typically we're going to have, I think, much more experienced, much more capable backup quarterbacks than what we may have in Ian Book. That's not to take anything away from him. We just don't know, right? We have no data on which to work. We really don't know. It is very atypical for a quarterback in his position to be, getting a start here in such a meaningful game. But here we are, as both these teams are fighting for playoff spots. Here we are. So he's going to be under center tonight. And so we just really don't know how low scoring this game could be. We do know that Saints defense is extremely good. And, I think maybe in light of the fact that their offense is kind of hampered or maybe sort of might be running not at full speed, that the Dolphins may respond in kind by being a little bit more conservative. Who knows? So I could totally wrap my head around how a 37-point total is actually fair in this one. So, take that for what it's worth here. There is a disagreement on the side of the total. There is no disagreement on the side of the point spread, and kind of sort of take that for what it's worth. Backing up though, for one additional point, and it relates to what we were just talking about. The line has really swung quite dramatically in this one from how it opened. So New Orleans actually opened from anywhere between like a 3 and a 3.5 point favorite. So they were, they started off a week ago as being a very clear favorite in the eyes of the market. And obviously a couple of days later when the news hit of the New Orleans, COVID situation with both Hill and Simeon being out, things have made their way all the way to Miami -3. So, a 6 or 6.5 point swing, quite dramatic. We oftentimes don't see moves that big. Certainly when they do happen, they tend to revolve around starting quarterback situations. And this one, this one's no different in terms of that kind of, concept. But the totals also dropped about 3 or 2.5 points. So certainly, there's the expectation that New Orleans is just going to be a very different offense tonight. And I think that's reasonable, given the roster.
Yep, and two pretty good defenses there too. So not surprised to see a low-scoring game and just not knowing much about both. Basically taking a guess. I was wrong though. He actually did play, at least in their first preseason game. He was 9 of 16, 126 yards, had an interception late in the game, but really not much to show. He played the second half. So really, again, like you said, Scott, no meaningful snaps in the NFL so far.
Right. And you just have to be honest about your uncertainty in this one. And I think there's a lot. So,
yep.
So take that and use it. So anyway, one last thing to touch on here is just, where the public money is going in this matchup. Both from, the answer is it's going to back Miami, both in terms of the percentage of bets placed as well as the amount of money being placed. They're both in favor of Miami. The number of bets is about an 80-20 split in favor of Miami, and the amount of money being bet is about a 70-30 split in favor of Miami. So, there's really, I feels like I say this often, but this one is unique. This game is unique. I think that public money, those splits are largely probably a function of the injury news hitting, or really the COVID news hitting on New Orleans, and people are just sort of following through and betting that. And I think, that all happened sort of, and those positions were all sort of put on. And the impact of that was for the lines to swing across the books in the way that they did. People showed up, hopefully trying to bet early on Miami off that news. And, I think that's sort of what we see here as we sit now a few hours before game time. It'll really be interesting to see what happens to New Orleans and how their offense runs tonight. Your guess is as good as mine. And I think one thing's for sure: they're gonna be fighting very, very hard to win this one. They need a win desperately. Both teams do, and obviously Miami's on quite a bit of a roll heading into this one.
Yeah, going to be an interesting game, I think is the best way to put it, with really, like you said, just really no way to know what we're going to see from New Orleans. We know, again, both defenses, the Saints defense, really good coming off that shutout of the Buccaneers. Dolphins defense hasn't been as good as we thought it was going to be, but lately have been playing pretty well. So I think it just, again, interesting is the best way to describe it, looking forward to the game tonight. So it'll just be one of those where we'll see what happens when it happens. Really hard to take either side in this one, just with all the uncertainty, like you said, Scott. So yeah, looking forward to it though. Almost, again, next time we're on here, it'll be 2022 and we will have just 1 week left in the regular season. So thank you all for listening here to our week 16 recap. Just remind you again, we'll be here every Monday. Scott and I recapping the weekend's action. On Thursdays, you can find me on our EdjSports betting preview, looking at the Thursday night football game, although actually there are no more Thursday night football games, so just be looking at a handful of games from the Sunday action. And you can find those on our EdjSports Podcast Network or on YouTube. We'll also have our coach rankings, updated coach rankings coming out on Wednesday. Again, we will have a video this week with our Champion Gaming brand ambassador, Katie George, and I reviewing the changes in the rankings and looking at some of those hot seat coaches as we near the end of the season. Give us 5-star reviews again on any of those platforms for your podcast or EdjSports YouTube channel. If you leave a comment, we'll read it on the next show. So give us some reviews, leave us some comments there. And then don't forget that our site and our app are available where you can get the pregame betting insights for every game, those fair value spreads and totals that Scott talked about, as well as the public betting. The app is available for both iOS and Android. And then one last announcement, as usual, Football Outsiders, they are still currently running their special for FO Plus, their premium subscription. It's just 99 cents a week for annual subscriptions. So be sure to check them out at footballoutsiders.com/subscribe. Scott, thank you for joining me. Everyone out there listening, thanks for joining. Enjoy the Monday Night Football action.